At the foot of Ermine Street, the Roman road in Hertfordshire, is Tibbles, a stately home built to replace the most magnificent house in England. That was once the property of Elizabeth I's chief minister, until, that is, the ever-acquisitive eye of King James VI of Scotland saw it, as he was on his way south to become James I, the new King of England. He told the owner it was a house fit for a king. I suspect the conversation went along the lines of, "Oh, I don't suppose you'd like to see your way clear to doing a great favour for your old dear dad and gossip who just happens to be your new king. I mean, but don't let that influence you. You be honest with me. It's just I was thinking, the house is so commodious and the hunting's wonderful and the Queen loves to go shopping at Lakeside. I mean, I just wondered if perhaps, well, maybe we could do a wee swapsy, you know, my place at Hatfield for your place here at Tibbles." Gosh, Your Majesty must be psychic. I mean, I was just going to say exactly the same thing to you. In fact, we've had a set of keys cut specially for Your Majesty, so if you'd like to take possession of your new palace, you'd do us great honour, Your Majesty. You snivelling, snotty, conniving little Scottish. Long after the Roundheads tore down the old palace, this place was built, and eventually it came into the hands of a wealthy brewing family, the subject of your first riddle. Why do you think a wealthy Victorian brewer would marry a banjo-playing barmaid who all his friends were absolutely convinced was just leading him up the garden path? Of course, it turned out to be a garden path with the finest garden gate in England, bar none. Terribly important garden gates, you know, especially if you want to get ahead. No, thank you, shenanigans. Tell Cook I'll have the smoked salmon after all. Well, the Mukes family were our wealthy brewers. Their son and heir, Henry, raised eyebrows by being a regular at the brewery tap, the Horseshoe. And if drinking with the lower orders wasn't bad enough, he scandalised Edwardian society by marrying this lady, Val Rees, occasional pantomime performer and banjo-playing barmaid at the Horseshoe. She was never received into polite but stuffy society, but that was their loss. She was great fun. Now, our girl had a thoroughly delicious sense of humour. She kept a menagerie of wild animals here in the grounds at Tibbles, and one of her favourite practical jokes was to get them to move the lion cages with real live lions into different parts of the shrubbery around the grounds. When people were out taking an innocent stroll, they'd suddenly be confronted totally unexpectedly by a lion roaring into their face. Like I say, wicked sense of humour. She lived her life extravagantly and eccentrically, particularly when it came to entertaining. And one of the places where Valerie Lady Mukes partied was at the bottom of the garden path, in the upper room of her second-hand garden gate. Long ago, the walled city of London was entered by 8 gates. One was a classical extravaganza by Sir Christopher Wren. This one, we think, the Temple Bar, barring the entrance to Westminster Palace. As you'd expect, it saw some sights. In 1356, Edward, the Black Prince, fresh from his victory at Poitiers, where his archers had won on points in the last hour of the game, Edward rode through here with a prisoner of war that set the crowd on a roar. No less a person than the King of France himself. Just rub him down and give him some oats, he'll be fine. Now, in 1381, the peasants revolt. Yeah, not strictly speaking a great demonstration of loyalty to the crown, but it did trim off some useless fat from the aristocracy. In the early 1500s, that's a paint roller. We'll try again. Thank you. In the early 1500s, Henry VIII insisted that the place be painted and generally titivated up so that he and his new wife, Anne Boleyn, could pass through on their way to their wedding and coronation. Of course, on that occasion, the crowd were, how shall I say, less than enthusiastic. They had a great deal of loyalty to the old Queen, Catherine of Aragon, and they were not best pleased at the usurping appearance of the King's great whore. However, in 1559, thank you, the daughter of the King's new whore, Elizabeth I, rode through Temple Bar to the cheers and applause of the crowd on her way to her coronation. Keep this for later, I think. And in 1588, the same Queen, good Queen Bess of blessed memory, rode beneath the arch in a sprung coach, one of the first ever to be seen in England. On that day, she rode to celebrate the victory of England over the Spanish Armada. Oh, come on our budgets, a coach. Do me a favour. At least this is a Raleigh. But what was all that severed head stuff about? Well, do you remember I said that Temple Bar was the resort of loyal subjects? Disloyal ones tended to fetch up here too. Traitors would have their heads spiked and displayed up above the gate. And it wasn't just their heads. Arms, legs, torsos, all of them would be displayed to drive home a very important point. That treason and traitors would never prosper. I think you better pass me the mallet. Thank you. You see, that didn't stop other people from prospering from the traitors' downfall. After the failure of Bonnie Prince Charlie's rebellion in 1745, the very last two traitors to have their heads displayed up above the gate made a tiny little sum for one enterprising individual. He sold, at a halfpenny a time, an opportunity to get a closer look at Messrs. Townley and Fletcher through the end of his telescope. In 1879, down came Temple Bar to make way for traffic. The stones were numbered and put into storage, and 10 years later, Lady M acquired them to build herself the most grandiose garden gate in the land. And thanks to her, it's still more or less in one piece, ready to be taken down once again and reassembled beside St. Paul's. The city's last surviving gateway is going home. What on earth do you think might be the thread that connects a bundle of old bones, a box full of badges, a beautiful bridge, some unconventional medieval bankers, and right in the middle of Royston, bang on the junction of the Roman Road, Ermine Street, and Icknield Way, a very mysterious hole in the ground? In the Middle Ages, pretty well everybody longed to go on pilgrimage, to travel to the shrine of a favourite saint, or even to the Holy Land itself. Armed with a stout stick, with your scrip over your shoulder, a sort of pilgrim's rucksack, and your letter of authority to prove you weren't just a meandering vagrant on the scrounge, you set off on your journey. Here was a chance to leave behind the daily drudge and to do your soul some good into the bargain. And remember, these weren't just weekends away, they were trips that could take months or even years. But to many an abbey and shrine, pilgrim was spelt P-R-O-F-I-T, bulging bags of profit. And places like the Fenland Abbey at Ramsey never missed a chance to carve themselves a large chunk of that financial cake. You see, pilgrims would come, stay the night, and in the morning, having prayed, they'd make a donation, a contribution for the upkeep of the holy community. Thank you very much. Have a nice journey. Do come again. But of course, if you wanted to make a real killing, then what you needed on the premises was the very thing that the pilgrims were on the road to see. You needed relics. Genuine, six-cylinder, gold-plated rock and roll relics that the saintly had left behind them very conveniently and very kindly before they shuffled off their mortal coil. With a decent set of relics, it was a license to coin your own money. Once upon a time, this was the village of Sleep. It changed its name for financial reasons. Welcome to St. Ives. Ramsey Abbey owned the village of Sleep. It had been given to them as a gift, and one day one of their serfs was ploughing his way through the field, and the plough stuck, bang, on what turned out to be a big stone coffin, complete with its last remaining occupant. So who was the dead bod? Well, he was rather conveniently identified as none other than that pilgrim magnate himself, the famous and lucrative St. Ivo. What a stroke of luck! A blessed miracle! Oh, dear. Brother Bob? Hello, mate. It's the Abbot of Ramsey here. Yeah, God's blessings on you. Listen, I just wondered if you can fit us in for some of that building work. Yeah, you never believe it, mate. We've really come into some money. So Ramsey had acquired their relics. The pilgrims had acquired a new destination, and St. Ivo's bones had acquired a shiny new shrine, which eventually brought in so much trade that the monks could afford the arm and a leg it cost to build a spanking new, top-of-the-range stone medieval bridge to cope with the sudden rush of pilgrims. When some kind Christian soul went to all the trouble of building a health and safety executive-approved stone bridge so that you could cross in safety and style, well, you were only too happy to offer up a prayer of gratitude in this very thoughtfully provided and conveniently situated chapel on the bridge. It also meant you were only too happy to cough up the toll. All proceeds and receipts to Ramsey Abbey, registered ecclesiastical charity. So, was it all a con? Well, it's just possible the stone coffin wasn't your bog standard Roman coffin and was actually the grave of St. Ivo. Of course, it's also possible that one day I'll get back into my Levi 501s. Right, we've done old bones and beautiful bridges. King's Lynn next for the badges bit. You see, like Southend Rock or a sombrero from Spain, the traveller wanted to bring something back to prove he'd actually made the trip. Some wanted a memento of their spiritual journey, the state of grace that they'd travelled to. Others, well, they just wanted something to pose around the streets of their hometown in so that everyone would say, "Ooh, there goes a cosmopolitan, well-travelled chap." Problem was, a lot of these souvenirs took the form of little bits of the shrine chipped off when the monks weren't looking. And understandably, the monks weren't best pleased at the prospect of their expensive and beautiful shrines disappearing under a wave of unofficial souvenir hunting. So in the 1190s, they came up with a wizard wheeze to solve the problem. The solution gave this country its first ever souvenir shops, selling tourist tat and all the associated trinkets. 700 years later, those trinkets became a consuming passion for a watchmaker, the man who made this watch, and whose shop was here on the High Street in King's Lynn. I wonder if it's still under guarantee. King's Lynn has a cracking little museum, and in it they've an unusually complete collection of pilgrim souvenir badges. But why has King's Lynn Museum got such a stonking collection of these cheap, cheerful, must-have accessories for the well-travelled medieval pilgrim? Well, it's all down to the activities of a Victorian gentleman, Mr. Thomas Pung, a man with a distinctly muddy past. The port was once a bustling, breathless place, packed with river traffic, despite the efforts of the Hughes to block the harbour with silty mud. But that mud has one advantage. Must remember not to look down. The advantage is that it's exceptionally good at preserving a certain type of archaeological artifact. The badges that the pilgrims used to wear. You see, tens of thousands of pilgrims came this way every year on their way to the shrine at Walsingham. And you're not telling me that with all those people clambering in and out of boats here at the Purfleet, some of them didn't fill the air with curses when they heard ping, followed by ooh, sploosh, as their precious little badge of their one and only visit to the shrine of St. James of Compostela went plonk into the water and the mud down below. They lay hidden, for the best part of 700 years, until our old friend, Mr. Pung, the watchmaker, discovered the medieval treasure that was lying buried in the sand and the mud. Well, being an enterprising Victorian gentleman, he decided to dig some up. Of course, being an enterprising Victorian gentleman, he didn't actually come down and get his hands dirty himself. Oh no, like any sensible soul, he offered a reward to the children of the town. He said that if the kids came down here for the day and they went mudlarking and looked for pilgrim badges, he would pay them 1 penny per child for their efforts. I mean, I know archaeology has always been seriously underfunded, but that is ridiculous. But it worked. That's why King's Lynn Museum's got the collection of badges it's got. I haven't found a pilgrim badge, but I'm no expert, but I'm hoping that's going to turn out to be a piece of late medieval crackle glaze. Walsingham and Bromham were Norfolk's pilgrim honeypots, but there were more exciting destinations for those whose faith outweighed their fear. If you decided to make the trek to the Holy Land, to the land of the Saracens, the unbelievers, then things got very dangerous indeed. Then you really did need serious protection. The Knights Templar were an order of warrior monks who protected pilgrims on that desperately dangerous journey. Now, a lot of tosh has talked about the Templars, but one truth is that they accumulated massive wealth and power and made a huge success of their financial enterprises. They invented the world's first ever traveller's check. True. It worked like this. When you set off on pilgrimage, the last thing you wanted to be taken with you was a big fat wodge of dosh tucked away in your pilgrim's scrip. Let's face it, there was every chance you'd have been mugged and relieved of your cash before you even got to Dover, never mind to Damascus. So one of the ideas that the Knights Templar came up with was to encourage pilgrims to come here to one of their preceptories or one of their commanderies and to hand over all your money. You made a deposit with the bank. When you'd done that, they gave you a little letter which said precisely how much money you'd left with them. As you travelled across Europe and into the Holy Land, whenever you needed some spare cash, you went to the Knights Templar hole in the wall, took out your letter and exchanged it for just sufficient coin to make the next stage of the journey. Thank you very much. God's blessings go with you too. See you in Damascus. So the final piece of the puzzle, the hole in the ground in the middle of Royston. Well, this cavern is covered in carvings connected with certain ceremonial rituals of the Knights Templars. Amongst the symbols on the walls is a carving of King David, a reference to Psalm 69, an appeal to God for help in the midst of misunderstanding and persecution. Well, in the early years of the 1300s, that's precisely where the Knights Templars found themselves, in the midst of misunderstanding and active persecution. The King of France had long been jealous of the land that the temple owned and the power and the wealth it gave them. He had his eye on all of that, and so he persuaded, or some would say coerced, the Pope to move against the order. He seized every single Knights Templar within his dominions and put them all on trial for their lives. He cooked up charges of heresy, of witchcraft, necromancy, sodomy, anything that could be made to stick, anything that could be used to bring down the power of the Knights Templar. And it worked. In March of 1314, Jacques de Molay, the last Grand Master of the Order of the Temple of Jerusalem, was burned to death at the stake on an island in the middle of the River Seine. Not long after, the Pope finally dissolved the Order of the Temple.